When I was younger, I used to work for a plumbing company down in Arizona. It was an interesting job, taking me all over the city in my little company van. I enjoyed the variety, meeting different people every day, and facing new challenges with each call. The desert heat was brutal, especially in the summer, but I'd grown up in Arizona and was used to it. The company I worked for was a small, family-owned business. The owner, Bill, was a gruff but fair man in his 60s who'd inherited the business from his father. He ran a tight ship, but he took care of his employees. I'd been working there for about 3 years when the events I'm about to describe took place. One thing about the job always piqued my curiosity. We sometimes got calls from the Navajo Reservation, a vast area covering parts of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. However, there was a strict company policy that we weren't allowed to go there. I never understood why, and whenever I asked my boss about it, he'd either dodge the question or give me vague, unsatisfactory answers. The most common response was that our car insurance wouldn't cover us if anything happened out there. Given that I drove a pretty big van filled with expensive equipment, this explanation seemed somewhat plausible. But there was always something in Bill's eyes when he said it, a flicker of, was it fear? It made me wonder if there was more to the story. I'd asked about it a couple of times over the years, but Bill always shut down the conversation quickly. It became something of a running joke among the other plumbers, the mysterious no-go zone of the Navajo Reservation. We'd speculate about what could be out there that was so dangerous for plumbers. Some of the guys came up with wild theories involving government conspiracies or ancient curses. I laughed along, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday, and we'd had a particularly tough week. A series of flash floods had caused havoc across the city, and we'd been working overtime to deal with the aftermath. Bill invited us all over to his place for a few beers, a rare occurrence that none of us were going to pass up. His house was an old ranch-style place on the outskirts of town, with a view of the desert that seemed to stretch on forever. As the night wore on and the beer flowed freely, the other guys gradually headed home until it was just Bill and me left, sitting on his back porch, watching the stars come out. Maybe it was the beer, or maybe it was the exhaustion from the long week, but Bill seemed more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. His usual gruff demeanor had softened, and there was a far-off look in his eyes as he stared out at the darkening desert. I decided to take a chance. "Hey, Bill," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "I've always wondered, what's the real reason we don't take jobs on the reservation?" I expected him to brush me off as he always had before, but to my surprise, he was quiet for a long moment, then let out a heavy sigh. "You really want to know, kid?" he asked, his voice low and serious. I nodded, suddenly feeling a chill despite the warm night air. Bill took a long pull from his beer, then set it down with a clink that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet night. "It was about 15 years ago," he began, his voice taking on a distant quality, as if he was seeing it all play out again in front of him. "Before I was the boss, I was just a plumber like you. Back then, the company policy was more flexible. We'd take a few contracts on the reservation now and then." He paused, taking another swig of beer. I waited, hardly daring to breathe, afraid that if I interrupted, he might change his mind about telling the story. "There was this one job," he continued. "Got a call from a man who claimed to be a dark magic man." Bill's voice caught a little on the words, as if he was uncomfortable even saying them. I didn't know what that meant at the time, and frankly, I didn't care. A job was a job, and money was money. Bill's eyes met mine, and I was startled by the intensity I saw there. The man was old, real old, barely spoke English, made communicating a real challenge. But he said there was something in his basement that needed fixing, so I went out there. As Bill spoke, painting a vivid picture of his arrival at the old man's isolated house, I found myself leaning forward, completely engrossed in the story. The desert night seemed to grow darker around us, the silence deeper, as if the very air was listening to Bill's tale. When I got there, the place was empty, no sign of the old man, just a note on the door. Bill's voice had dropped to almost a whisper now. "Leak in basement. Don't look around." That's all it said. He shook his head, a rueful smile on his face. I should have turned around right then and there, should have gotten in my van and driven away as fast as I could, but I didn't. I was young, cocky, thought I could handle anything, so I went inside. As Bill described his descent into the basement, the eerie silence, the dripping sound that led him to the leaky pipe, I felt a growing sense of dread. Something terrible was coming. I knew it, but I couldn't have guessed just how horrifying it would be. I was working on the pipe when I heard it, Bill continued, his eyes now fixed on some point in the distance. A scratching sound, like something wooden being scraped. At first I thought it was just a pet, maybe a dog, but then I heard the voice. Bill's hands were shaking now, and not just from the beer. It was coming from behind this door in the corner of the basement, a heavy wooden door with 3 big padlocks on it. The voice, it sounded like a little girl begging for help. I felt my blood run cold as Bill described his frantic attempts to open the door, his growing horror as he realized something was terribly wrong. The way the voice knew his name, the inhuman feet he glimpsed under the door, each detail added to the mounting terror of the story. "I ran," Bill said, his voice hoarse. "I ran faster than I've ever run in my life. I could hear it behind me, that thing, whatever it was. It was screaming, shaking the whole house. I made it to my van somehow, drove off like the devil himself was chasing me." He fell silent then, staring into his empty beer bottle as if it held the answers to the universe. I sat there, my mind reeling, trying to process what I'd just heard. "Bill," I said finally, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. What do you think that thing was?" He looked at me then, and the fear I saw in his eyes made my heart skip a beat. "I don't know, kid, I don't want to know, but I do know this. There are things out there, things that don't fit into our nice, safe view of the world. Things that are better left alone." We sat in silence for a long time after that, each lost in our own thoughts. As I drove home that night, the dark desert stretching out on either side of the road, I couldn't shake the feeling that the world had suddenly become a much larger, much more terrifying place. From that day on, I never questioned our company's policy about the reservation again, but I also found myself looking at the world differently, always aware that behind the facade of normalcy, there might be things lurking that defied explanation. Years later, long after I'd left that job and moved on to other things, I still think about Bill's story. I've never been able to shake the feeling that there's more out there than we know, more than we can explain. And sometimes, on dark nights when the wind whispers through the desert, I find myself wondering about that basement, that door, and what might be waiting behind it. Because once you've glimpsed the truth about the world, once you've heard a story like Bill's, you can never really go back to believing that the universe is simple or safe. You're left with the knowledge that there are things out there in the darkness, things that are better left undisturbed. And all you can do is hope that they stay there, on their side of the door, in the shadows where they belong. The revelation from Bill that night changed more than just my perspective on the world. It changed how I approached my job, how I interacted with clients, and even how I viewed the landscapes around me. The vast open deserts of Arizona no longer seemed like empty expanses of sand and rock. Now they felt like they could be hiding anything, concealing secrets in their endless canyons and shadowy mesas. For weeks after that night, I found myself jumpy on the job. Every creaky floorboard, every unexplained sound in an old house's plumbing set my nerves on edge. I'd catch myself staring at closed doors in basements, wondering what might be lurking behind them. The other guys at work noticed the change in me, but I couldn't bring myself to explain. How could I tell them that our gruff, no-nonsense boss had essentially confirmed the existence of supernatural horrors? About a month after Bill's confession, we got another call from the reservation. As usual, Bill turned it down, But this time I saw the conflict in his eyes. He knew what was out there, knew the potential danger, but he also knew that someone out there needed help. I could see the weight of that knowledge bearing down on him. It was then that I realized the true burden Bill had been carrying all these years. He wasn't just protecting us, his employees, from potential danger. He was protecting everyone, the people on the reservation, the wider community, maybe even the world at large, from forces they couldn't understand or combat. As time passed, I started to hear whispers, snippets of conversation from longtime residents of the area. They never spoke openly about it, but there were stories. Tales of people who went out to the reservation and never came back, of strange lights in the desert night, of sounds that couldn't be explained by any natural phenomenon. I found myself paying more attention to local legends and Native American folklore. The Navajo have rich traditions of skinwalkers and other supernatural entities. While I'd always dismissed these as mere stories before, now I couldn't help but wonder how much truth might be hidden in these ancient tales. One day, about 6 months after that night at Bill's house, I was on a job in an old part of town. The house was a Victorian-era structure, all creaky floorboards and winding corridors. As I was working on a pipe in the basement, I heard a sound, a faint scratching, followed by what sounded like a child's whisper. My blood ran cold. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of there as fast as I could. But another part of me, the part that had been changed by Bill's story, knew I had to investigate. I couldn't leave, not knowing if someone or something might be trapped. Cautiously, I made my way toward the sound. It was coming from behind an old wooden door, half hidden behind some shelves. My hand shook as I reached for the handle. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever I might find. But when I opened the door, there was nothing there. Just an old storage room filled with dusty boxes and forgotten knickknacks. No child, no monster, nothing out of the ordinary at all. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just narrowly avoided something terrible. That night I called Bill. When he answered, I could tell from his voice that he knew why I was calling. "You encountered something, didn't you?" he said, his voice gruff but tinged with concern. I told him about what had happened, or rather what hadn't happened. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Bill spoke. "Listen, kid," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of experience. "What I told you that night, it's not the kind of knowledge that makes your life easier. It's the kind that burdens you. Now that you know, you'll see signs of it everywhere. Some of it will be real, but a lot of it will just be your mind playing tricks on you. The important thing is to stay vigilant, but don't let it consume you." He paused, and I could hear him take a deep breath. "There's a reason I don't talk about this stuff. It's not just about protecting people from what's out there. It's about protecting them from the knowledge itself. Because once you know, really know, that these things exist, well, it changes you, and not always for the better." I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Bill was right. The knowledge had changed me. I saw the world differently now. Every shadow held potential threats. Every unexplained sound could be something sinister. But I also felt a new sense of purpose. If these things were real, then people needed protection, not just from the entities themselves, but from the crushing weight of knowing about them. From that day on, I approached my job with a new perspective. Yes, I was there to fix pipes and solve plumbing issues, but I was also a gatekeeper of sorts, standing between the everyday world of leaky faucets and clogged drains and a darker world that most people would never know existed. Years have passed since then. I've had my own encounters, some that I can explain away and others that still haunt my dreams. I've learned to live with the knowledge, to carry it without letting it overwhelm me. And I've learned that sometimes the most important part of this job isn't the plumbing at all. It's about being there, being watchful, and being ready to face whatever might be lurking in the dark corners of the world. Because in the end, that's what it means to truly serve your community. It's not just about fixing what's broken. It's about standing guard against the things that most people don't even know they need protection from. And if that means sometimes turning down a job on a certain reservation or being extra cautious around old basement doors, well, that's a small price to pay for keeping the horrors at bay. My father told me a story once. I'll never forget it for a few reasons. I think it's the first story he's ever told me as a child. It's also the story of how my grandfather had died. But honestly, that isn't the reason. You hear stories on TV, or sometimes you overhear something in public. People talk about ghosts or aliens, and you think to yourself, that isn't real. They're making it up, or they're mistaken, they're crazy, something like that. You can't just believe it. That is, until something happens to you. Something that brings it all together, connects the dots in a way that you didn't think of before. Maybe it happened to you, or maybe you hear about the same story again and again from different people. It doesn't take long for the world to become a lot bigger than you thought it was. I remember the night my father told me this story. I was about 12 years old, and we were sitting on the porch of our old farmhouse in Ohio. The sun had just set, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. There was a chill in the air, and Dad had wrapped an old quilt around my shoulders. He seemed different that night, more serious than usual. His eyes had a faraway look, as if he was seeing something beyond the fields that stretched out before us. "Son," he said, his voice low and gravelly, "there's something I need to tell you. Something about your grandfather, and about the night he died." I sat up straighter, suddenly alert. Grandpa had died before I was born, and Dad rarely spoke about him. This was new territory, and I could sense the importance of the moment. Dad took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "What I'm going to tell you, it's going to sound crazy. But I need you to listen, and I need you to understand that every word of it is true." And then he began his tale, a tale that would change the way I saw the world forever. "Your grandfather and I, we used to go hunting together. Not for sport, mind you, but because we needed the money. Times were tough back then, and we'd hunt coyotes for their pelts. $50 a skin, it helped put food on the table." He paused, lost in memory for a moment. "Sometimes, if we were lucky, we'd come across a deer. Our landlord didn't mind us taking one now and then, and it would feed the family for days." I nodded, trying to imagine my father as a young man out in the woods with his own father. It was an image that both excited and unsettled me. "This particular night," Dad continued, "we were out later than usual. We'd had no luck with the coyotes, and we were hoping to at least bring home some venison. We were cutting through the woods on our way back home when we came upon something." His voice had dropped to almost a whisper, and I found myself leaning in closer to hear. At first we thought it was the work of coyotes, or maybe a pack of feral dogs. There was blood everywhere, splattered on the trees, soaking into the grass, turning the creek water red. But as we got closer, we realized this was something else entirely. Dad's eyes had taken on a haunted look, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "You see, son, when predators like wolves or coyotes hunt, they do it clean. They'll single out the weak or the sick, run it down, and make a quick kill. What we saw that night, it wasn't a hunt, it was a massacre." He described the scene in vivid detail, the torn bodies of the deer, parts strewn about as if whatever had attacked them had done so out of pure savagery rather than hunger. As he spoke, I could almost see it, could almost smell the coppery scent of blood in the air. "Your grandfather, he was a brave man, foolishly brave maybe. He decided we needed to track whatever had done this, to put it down before it could hurt anyone else. I wanted to go home, to call for help, but he insisted, said it was our duty." Dad's voice cracked a little, and he paused to collect himself. I sat in silence, both terrified and captivated by the story. We followed the trail of blood deeper into the woods. The further we went, the more wrong everything felt. The woods were too quiet, like every living thing was holding its breath. And then we started hearing noises. He trailed off, his eyes unfocused, as if he was back there in those woods, reliving that terrible night. "What kind of noises, Dad?" I whispered, almost afraid to ask. He turned to look at me, and the fear I saw in his eyes made my blood run cold. "Noises no animal should make, son. Screams that sounded almost human, but not quite. And underneath it all, this low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once." As he continued his story, describing their terrifying trek through the darkening woods, following the trail of a creature they couldn't identify, I found myself glancing nervously at the shadows beyond our porch. The familiar landscape of our farm suddenly seemed alien and threatening. Little did I know that this story, as horrifying as it was just the beginning. That night would set in motion a chain of events that would lead me to my own encounter with something beyond explanation, something that would make me question everything I thought I knew about the world. But for now, I sat and listened, as my father's words painted a picture of a night that ended in tragedy and terror, a night that would haunt him for the rest of his life. My father's voice grew more strained as he continued. "We kept following the trail, even as every instinct told us to turn back. The sounds were getting louder, more frenzied. It was like the whole forest had gone mad." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "That's when we came upon the old schoolhouse. You know the one, son. That abandoned building on top of the hill, half torn apart by that tornado years ago." I nodded, familiar with the local landmark that had been the subject of many ghost stories among us kids. As we got closer, the noises changed. There was this screeching sound, like nothing I'd ever heard before. It was high-pitched, but also had this low growl underneath, both at the same time. It didn't seem possible for any creature to make that sound. Dad's hands were shaking now, and I could see beads of sweat on his forehead despite the cool night air. "Your grandfather, he was determined to see this through. We crept up to about 20 yards from the schoolhouse when we heard another sound. It was, God, I don't even know how to describe it, like paper being torn, but mixed with the sound of water sloshing in a bucket." He looked at me, his eyes haunted. "Your grandfather whispered to me then. He said we were about to corner our prey, that any animal will fight when it's cornered. He thought it was probably a single rabid dog, but deep down I think we both knew it was something much worse." Dad's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "The plan was to sneak up while it was eating, shoot it, and keep shooting until it stopped moving. If it got to your grandfather, it was my job to shoot or stab it until it got off him." I felt a chill run down my spine at the grim determination in my father's voice. "We approached slowly, me right behind your grandfather, and then we saw it." Dad's eyes seemed to lose focus, as if he was seeing that terrible sight all over again. It was leaning over a carcass, tearing off flesh and just throwing it. There was blood everywhere, glistening in the moonlight. The creature, it looked almost like a man, but not quite human. It had arms and legs like ours, but it was sitting like a monkey, all hunched over. And its hands, they weren't normal. Long fingers with claws at the end. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the story coming to life in my mind with vivid, terrifying detail. Your grandfather hesitated. He wasn't about to fire at what looked like a person, so he cleared his throat, trying to get its attention. Dad's voice cracked. "Son, I swear, in that moment all sound just stopped. I've never heard true silence before that, and never again afterwards. For 2 seconds, nothing made any noise. Nothing." He took a shuddering breath. And then the thing turned around. It let out this ungodly cry and pounced on your grandfather. He got a shot off, but I think he missed. If he hit it, it didn't even faze the creature. Tears were forming in Dad's eyes now. It was on him in an instant, tearing entire parts of him off. I started shooting it point blank with my .22, but the thing barely bled. I got off 5 rounds and then started hitting it with the butt of the gun, but it didn't even budge, didn't even seem to notice I was there. I felt sick to my stomach, but I couldn't look away, couldn't stop listening. It tore out his throat, ripped his nose clean off, and gouged out his eyes. Then it scalped him and started digging in. I don't exactly remember what happened next, but somehow your grandfather's knife ended up in the thing's shoulder, and what was left of your grandfather ended up on my back. Dad's voice was barely audible now. I ran faster than I've ever run before or since. I could hear it following me, branches cracking, that terrible screeching sound, but I never looked back, not once. He fell silent for a long moment, lost in the horrific memory. When he spoke again, his voice was hollow. I tripped and fell in some gravel. When I looked up, I saw our landlord and some of his friends around a campfire. I screamed for help, told them to call an ambulance, but then the landlord looked at me and said something I'll never forget. Dad's eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of grief and lingering terror. He asked me, "What is that on your back?" And then he realized it was your grandfather's shirt with bits of him still in it. That's when we heard that screeching again. The landlord grabbed me, threw me inside. We locked all the doors, got the guns out. He shook his head slowly. The creature circled the house all night. We could hear it, see glimpses of it through the windows. It only left when the sun came up. Dad fell silent, the story apparently over. I sat there, stunned, trying to process what I'd just heard. Part of me wanted to believe it was just a story, a terrible nightmare my father had conjured up. But the raw pain and fear in his eyes told me otherwise. "Dad," I said hesitantly, what do you think that thing was?" He looked at me for a long moment before answering. "Your grandfather's people, the Cherokee, they had stories about creatures they called skinwalkers. Humans who could take on animal forms or something in between. I don't know if that's what we encountered that night, but I do know it was something that shouldn't exist in this world." As we sat there in silence, the night seeming darker and more ominous than before, I realized that my understanding of the world had fundamentally shifted. There were things out there, terrible things that defied explanation, and somehow I knew that this knowledge, this story, would shape the course of my life in ways I couldn't yet imagine. I've never been one for camping. The appeal of sleeping on the hard ground, battling mosquitoes, and foregoing modern comforts has always eluded me. Give me a comfortable bed, air conditioning, and indoor plumbing any day. But life has a funny way of pushing us out of our comfort zones, especially when it comes to the people we love most. My daughter Emily is the complete opposite of me when it comes to the great outdoors. At 10 years old, she's a bundle of energy and curiosity, always eager to explore and experience new things. Her fascination with nature and adventure is something I both admire and, if I'm being honest, find a little perplexing. It all started when Emily came home from school one day, her eyes shining with excitement. "Dad, Dad," she exclaimed, practically bouncing as she entered our apartment. "Guess what we learned about in school today?" I smiled, always happy to see her so enthusiastic about her education. "What's got you so excited, sweetie?" "We learned about camping and survival skills," she said, dumping her backpack on the floor and pulling out a colorful pamphlet. "Look, our teacher gave us this. It shows all the cool things you can do when you go camping." I took the pamphlet, flipping through pages filled with images of happy families gathered around campfires, hiking through lush forests, and gazing at star-filled skies. It all looked very idyllic, but I couldn't help thinking about the less glamorous aspects, the bugs, the lack of comfortable sleeping arrangements, the potential dangers lurking in the wild. "That's great, honey," I said, trying to match her enthusiasm. "It looks like you learned a lot today." But Emily wasn't satisfied with my lukewarm response. She fixed me with those big pleading eyes that she knows I have trouble resisting. "Dad, can we go camping? Please? It looks so fun." And there it was, the request I'd been dreading since I first saw that pamphlet. I hesitated, searching for a gentle way to let her down. Well, sweetie, camping takes a lot of preparation and equipment, and you know I'm not really the outdoorsy type. Her face fell, disappointment clear in her eyes. But Dad, all my friends have gone camping with their families. Sarah even went last weekend and she said it was the best time ever. I felt a pang of guilt. It was true that I wasn't the most adventurous parent, and I knew Emily sometimes missed out on experiences because of my preferences. I thought about my own childhood, how my parents had always encouraged me to try new things, even if they weren't comfortable with them themselves. Looking at Emily's hopeful face, I made a decision. Maybe it was time for me to step out of my comfort zone for her sake. You know what? Let's give it a try, I said, barely believing the words coming out of my mouth. Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. Then she let out a squeal of joy and threw her arms around me. Really? You mean it? We're going camping? I hugged her back, already wondering if I was going to regret this decision. Yes, really, but let's start small, okay? How about we camp in our backyard first? That way, if anything goes wrong, we're close to home. Emily nodded eagerly, too excited by the prospect of camping to be disappointed that we weren't heading into the wilderness right away. That's a great idea, Dad. It'll be like a practice run. Can we do it this weekend? I nodded, mentally rearranging my weekend plans. Sure, we can do it this weekend, but we'll need to get some supplies first. How about we make a list of what we need? For the next hour, Emily and I sat at the kitchen table, poring over her camping pamphlet and making a list of essential items: tent, sleeping bags, flashlights, first aid kit. The list grew longer and longer. I tried not to wince at the thought of how much this little experiment might cost. As we worked, I couldn't help but notice how engaged and focused Emily was. She was taking this very seriously, thinking through every detail and coming up with ideas I never would have considered. It was a side of her I didn't often get to see, and I found myself becoming more enthusiastic about the idea despite my reservations. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, I sat in the living room looking out at our modest backyard. It wasn't much, just a small patch of grass with a few trees along the fence line. But to Emily, it was about to become a campground, a place of adventure and new experiences. I thought about my own childhood, the times I'd spent indoors while my more adventurous friends were out exploring. I'd always told myself I was content with my books and video games, but looking back, I wondered if I'd missed out on something important. Maybe this camping trip wasn't just for Emily. Maybe it was a chance for me to experience something new, to bond with my daughter in a way we never had before. And who knows, maybe I'd even enjoy it. As I went to bed that night, I found myself, much to my surprise, looking forward to our backyard camping adventure. Little did I know that this simple father-daughter bonding experience was about to turn into something far more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. The weekend arrived faster than I expected. Emily was bursting with excitement as we set up our tent in the backyard. I have to admit, her enthusiasm was infectious. As we worked together to pitch the tent and organize our supplies, I found myself enjoying the experience more than I thought I would. "Dad, look, I think I see a shooting star," Emily exclaimed as we sat outside our tent that evening. The night was clear, and the stars seemed brighter than usual. I smiled, relishing this moment of connection with my daughter. It's beautiful, isn't it? As the night deepened, we roasted marshmallows over a small fire pit and told stories. Emily was in her element, regaling me with tales she'd learned in school about constellations and forest creatures. Eventually, her words began to slow, and I could see her eyelids drooping. "Time for bed, kiddo," I said, ruffling her hair. We crawled into our sleeping bags, and I listened as Emily's breathing slowed into the rhythm of sleep. Despite the hard ground beneath me, I felt a sense of peace. Maybe this camping thing wasn't so bad after all. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, I was jolted awake by a sound. At first, I couldn't place it. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard before, a cross between a screech and a low guttural growl. My heart began to race as I strained my ears, trying to determine where the sound was coming from. It seemed to be coming from the woods beyond our fence, but it was hard to tell for sure. I glanced over at Emily, relieved to see she was still fast asleep, oblivious to the unsettling noise. I didn't want to wake her and cause unnecessary fear if it turned out to be nothing. Slowly, carefully, I unzipped my sleeping bag and crawled to the tent entrance. The sound came again, louder this time. It sent chills down my spine. Whatever was making that noise, it wasn't any animal I was familiar with. I unzipped the tent flap just enough to peer out. The backyard was bathed in silvery moonlight, casting eerie shadows across the grass. Everything seemed still, peaceful even. But then I saw it. At the far end of the yard near the fence bordering the forest, something moved. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It looked like a shadow, darker than the surrounding night, shifting and undulating in a way that defied natural movement. I blinked hard, sure that when I opened my eyes again the strange shape would be gone, but it wasn't. If anything, it seemed more defined now. As I watched, frozen in a mixture of fear and disbelief, the shape began to move. It was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs too long and jointed in all the wrong places. It moved with a fluid grace that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Was this some kind of elaborate prank? A hallucination brought on by too many campfire stories? But deep down, I knew. This was real, and it was unlike anything I'd ever encountered before. The creature, for lack of a better word, seemed to be pacing along the fence line. Its movements were purposeful, almost as if it was patrolling. Every so often it would stop and turn its head towards our tent. I couldn't make out any features in the darkness, but I had the unsettling feeling that it was aware of our presence. I wanted to retreat back into the tent, to wake Emily and make a run for the house, but I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or even call out. All I could do was watch in horrified fascination as this impossible being moved through our backyard. Suddenly the creature stopped. It turned fully towards our tent, and I felt my blood run cold. Even though I couldn't see its eyes, I knew with absolute certainty that it was looking directly at me. For what felt like an eternity, we stayed like that, me peering out from the relative safety of the tent, and this otherworldly being standing motionless in the moonlight. The night seemed to hold its breath, the usual sounds of crickets and distant traffic completely silenced. Then, without warning, the creature moved. It took a step towards our tent, its movement so fluid it seemed to glide across the grass. That was all it took to break me out of my paralysis. I scrambled backward, zipping the tent flap closed as quietly as I could with shaking hands. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure it would wake Emily, but she slept on, blissfully unaware of the terror just outside. I crawled back to my sleeping bag, my mind racing. What should I do? Should I wake Emily and make a run for it? But what if sudden movement attracted the creature's attention? Should I call for help? But who would believe me if I described what I'd seen? As I lay there, every muscle tense, straining my ears for any sound of approach, a new noise cut through the silence. It was a scratching sound, like claws or long nails dragging across the fabric of the tent. I held my breath, my eyes wide in the darkness. The scratching continued, moving slowly around the perimeter of the tent. It was as if the creature was testing, searching for a way in. I reached out and grasped Emily's hand, ready to shake her awake at a moment's notice. But still I hesitated. As long as the creature remained outside, maybe it was better to let her sleep through this nightmare. The scratching stopped at the tent entrance. I could hear something breathing heavily just on the other side of the thin fabric barrier. It was a wet, raspy sound that sent shivers down my spine. Then slowly the zipper of the tent began to move. The zipper inched upward, each tooth separating with an agonizing slowness that seemed to stretch time itself. My breath caught in my throat and I found myself frozen, torn between the instinct to flee and the desperate hope that if I remained perfectly still, the creature might somehow overlook us. But as the opening widened, revealing a sliver of the night beyond, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. With a sudden surge of paternal protectiveness, I shook Emily awake. "Emily," I whispered urgently, my hand over her mouth to muffle any sound she might make. Her eyes flew open, wide with confusion and fear, as she registered the panic on my face. I put a finger to my lips, then pointed at the slowly opening tent flap. Her gaze followed my gesture, and I felt her body stiffen as she realized something was very wrong. In that moment, as I looked into my daughter's frightened eyes, I knew I had to be brave. For her. I had to get us out of this nightmare. With my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, I leaned close to Emily's ear and whispered as quietly as I could. "When I say run, we sprint for the house. Don't look back. Just run, okay?" She nodded, her face pale in the dim light that filtered through the tent fabric. The zipper was almost fully open now. I tensed, ready to spring into action. Just as I saw a long, pale hand begin to push through the opening, I shouted, "Run!" We burst out of the tent, catching the creature by surprise. In the split second I allowed myself to look, I saw it recoil, momentarily stunned by our sudden appearance. Emily was ahead of me, her small legs pumping furiously as she sprinted towards the back door of our house. I was right behind her, my eyes locked on her back, willing her to go faster. I could hear the creature recovering, its unnatural movements rustling through the grass behind us. The sound spurred me on, lending speed to my legs that I didn't know I possessed. We reached the back door, and I fumbled with the keys, my hand shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. I risked a glance over my shoulder and immediately wished I hadn't. The creature was crossing the yard with impossible speed, its long limbs eating up the distance between us. In the full moonlight, I could see it clearly for the first time, and the sight nearly stopped my heart. It was vaguely humanoid, but that's where any resemblance to humanity ended. Its skin was a sickly pale color, stretched tight over an emaciated frame. Its arms and legs were too long, jointed in ways that defied anatomy. But it was the face that would haunt my nightmares for years to come. Where there should have been eyes, there were only dark, empty sockets. Its mouth was a gaping maw filled with needle-sharp teeth. As it ran, it let out that terrible screeching growl I'd heard earlier. Just as the creature reached out with its long, clawed hands, I managed to get the door open. We tumbled inside, and I slammed the door shut, locking it immediately. Emily was crying now, the fear and confusion finally overwhelming her. I scooped her up in my arms, holding her close as I ran through the house, closing and locking every door and window. We ended up in my bedroom, huddled together on the bed. I could hear the creature outside, circling the house, occasionally scratching at the walls or windows. Emily buried her face in my chest, her small body shaking with sobs. "It's okay, sweetheart," I murmured, stroking her hair. "We're safe now, it can't get in." But even as I said the words, I wasn't sure I believed them. What was this thing? How could something like this exist? And most importantly, what did it want? We stayed like that for hours, jumping at every sound, every shadow. I kept expecting the creature to burst through a window or somehow find its way inside. But as the night wore on, the sounds outside began to fade. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains, I realized the night had gone quiet. No more scratching, no more of that terrible screeching growl. Had it gone? Emily had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep, but I couldn't bring myself to close my eyes. I gently laid her down on the bed and, steeling my nerves, went to the window. Slowly, carefully, I pulled back the curtain just enough to peer out. The backyard was bathed in the soft light of early morning. Everything looked normal. The tent was still there, though it had collapsed at some point during the night. There was no sign of the creature. I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Had it all been a terrible nightmare? But no, the fear had been too real, too visceral, and Emily had seen it too. As I stood there trying to make sense of what had happened, I realized something had changed, not just in our backyard, but in me. The world suddenly seemed much larger, much stranger, and much more dangerous than I had ever imagined. But as I looked back at Emily, sleeping peacefully on the bed, I also realized something else. I would face 1,000 such creatures to keep her safe. Our camping trip may have turned into a nightmare, but it had awakened something in me, a fierce protectiveness and a determination to be the father Emily needed, no matter what terrors the world might hold. I knew that life would never be quite the same after this night. But as I settled back onto the bed, pulling Emily close, I also knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. Life on the edge of Ravens Peak is as close as you can get to truly being off the grid without disappearing entirely. It suits me fine. The air is crisp, the sky is vast, and my nearest neighbor is more than a shout away. My cabin, perched at the highest accessible point of my property near an old barn, faces a road that hardly merits the name, and beyond that, the endless dark embrace of the forest. This mountain, steeped in local lore, has always been a character in its own right in the stories told by the indigenous elders. They speak of it with a respectful fear, cautioning that the spirits dwelling here do not take kindly to human intrusion. I've learned to listen to these subtleties over the years. The land has a language all its own. As I sit on my porch nursing a steaming mug of coffee, I can't shake the feeling that something is off. The wind whispers through the pines, carrying with it a chill that seems out of place for early autumn. I pull my jacket tighter around me, my eyes scanning the tree line. Nothing seems amiss, yet the unease persists. I've lived here for 2 decades now, and I've grown accustomed to the mountain's moods. But today there's a tension in the air, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks, only there isn't a cloud in the sky. My dogs, Shadow and Luna, lie at my feet, their ears pricked forward, alert. They feel it too, whatever it is. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I head inside. The cabin feels safe, a refuge from the growing darkness outside. I busy myself with dinner preparations, trying to shake off the strange feeling that's been dogging me all day. It's as I'm washing up the dishes that I hear it, a distant wail of sirens. One, then another, then a third. In 20 years, I've rarely heard sirens up here. The sound fades as quickly as it came, leaving behind a silence that seems to press against my eardrums. I try to rationalize it. Maybe there was an accident on the main road. It happens, especially when tourists underestimate the mountain's treacherous turns. But a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispers that this is just the beginning. Sleep doesn't come easy that night. I toss and turn, my dreams filled with shadowy figures and distant, inhuman cries. I wake to find the power out. It's not unusual up here, where storms or fallen trees often knock out the electricity. But as I go through my morning routine by lamplight, I can't help but feel that this outage is somehow different. I spend the morning chopping wood, the rhythmic thunk of the axe a welcome distraction from my unease. Shadow and Luna stick close, their usual enthusiasm for exploring the woods noticeably absent. By afternoon, the power's still out. I decide to make the trek into town for supplies and information. The drive down the mountain is tense. The forest seems to press in on the narrow road, branches reaching out like grasping fingers. Millbrook, the nearest town, is abuzz with rumors. The diner is packed, and I overhear snatches of conversation as I wait for my coffee. 3 cars just gone. Search and rescue couldn't find a trace. My cousin swears he saw something in the woods. I catch the eye of Sarah, the waitress. She's lived in Millbrook all her life, and if anyone knows what's going on, it's her. Quite the excitement, I say, nodding towards the crowded diner. Sarah leans in, her voice low. 3 separate incidents on the mountain road last night. Cars found abandoned, no sign of the drivers. Search and rescue been out since dawn. A chill runs down my spine. Any theories? She shrugs, but her eyes are worried. Official line is they wandered off, got lost in the dark. But she trails off, glancing around before continuing. Some folks are saying it's the mountain, that it's hungry. I thank her, my appetite gone. As I drive back up the mountain, her words echo in my mind. The mountain, hungry, it's nonsense, of course, and yet. The power comes back on just as I'm settling in for the night. The sudden brightness is almost shocking after a day spent in dimness. I should feel relieved, but instead, the humming of the refrigerator and the soft glow of the lights only serve to heighten my sense of unease. What's out there in the dark? The morning brings a thick, cloying mist that clings to everything. It muffles sound and turns the familiar landscape into something alien and foreboding. I can barely see the old barn from my porch. I spend the morning indoors catching up on work. As a freelance writer, I can go days without needing to interact with the outside world. Usually I relish this solitude. Today it feels oppressive. Around midday, the mist begins to lift, revealing a sky heavy with dark clouds. The weather report warns of a severe storm approaching. I secure everything outside and bring in extra firewood, just in case. As I'm heading back to the cabin, I freeze. There, at the edge of the clearing, is a figure. For a moment, my heart leaps into my throat. Then I realize it's just a deer, a young buck, watching me with wide, dark eyes. We stare at each other for a long moment. There's something in its gaze, something almost knowing. Then it turns and bounds into the forest, leaving me with a feeling I can't quite name. The storm hits just after nightfall. Rain lashes against the windows, and wind howls around the eaves of the cabin. It sounds almost like voices wailing in pain or fury. I'm halfway through a novel when the lights flicker and die. The sudden darkness is absolute. I fumble for my flashlight, my heart pounding. As I flick it on, a flash of lightning illuminates the room, and for a split second I swear I see a face pressed against the window. I jerk back, nearly falling off the couch. Shadow and Luna start barking, a frenzied sound I've never heard from them before. I force myself to approach the window, shining the flashlight beam out into the storm. There's nothing there. Of course there isn't. It was just a trick of the light, my imagination running wild. I tell myself this over and over as I double-check the locks and close all the curtains. The storm rages all night. I don't sleep a wink. The storm has passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed. Trees are down everywhere, branches and debris scattered across my property. I spend the morning clearing what I can, the physical labor a welcome distraction from the events of the past few days. As I'm dragging a fallen branch to the woodpile, I notice something odd. There, in the soft earth near the tree line, is a footprint, but it's like no print I've ever seen before. It's huge, easily twice the size of my own foot, and the shape is all wrong. Too many toes, elongated and curved like claws. I stare at it, my mind refusing to process what I'm seeing. It can't be real. Maybe it's just an odd impression left by fallen debris. Maybe. A twig snaps in the forest, loud in the post-storm quiet. I whirl around, my heart in my throat. The trees stare back, impassive and dark. I hurry back to the cabin, my skin crawling with the feeling of unseen eyes upon me. Inside, I fire up my laptop, desperate for a connection to the outside world. The local news site is full of storm reports, but buried among them is a small article that makes my blood run cold. Search for missing hikers continues, the headline reads. A group of 5 experienced outdoorsmen all vanished on the mountain 2 days ago. The article is frustratingly vague on details, but one line stands out. Unusual tracks found at campsite perplex investigators. I think of the strange footprint and shudder. As night falls, I find myself jumping at every sound. The creaking of the cabin settling, the wind in the trees, a sudden thump on the roof that's probably just a falling pine cone but sounds like footsteps. I don't realize I've dozed off until I'm startled awake by a sound. A cry, high and desperate, somewhere between a child's scream and an animal's howl. Shadow and Luna explode into frenzied barking, clawing at the door. I'm on my feet before I know it, heart pounding. The cry comes again, closer this time. It sounds like it's coming from just beyond the tree line. Every instinct screams at me to stay inside, to not open that door. But what if someone's out there? What if they need help? My hand trembles as I reach for the doorknob. I open it a crack, peering out into the darkness. "Hello?" I call, my voice sounding small and frightened. "Is someone there?" The night is silent. Even the dogs have gone quiet. The silence stretches, becoming oppressive, expectant. Then from the darkness comes a sound that turns my blood to ice. A low, rumbling growl, unlike anything I've ever heard before. It's not a bear, not a mountain lion. It's something else. I slam the door shut, fumbling with the locks. My breath comes in short, sharp gasps. What was that? What's out there? Sleep is impossible. I spend the night huddled on the couch, dogs pressed close on either side, jumping at every sound from the forest beyond. Dawn breaks, gray and cheerless. I've barely slept, my eyes gritty and sore from staring into the darkness. The forest looks innocent in the early morning light, but I know better now. There's something out there, something that doesn't belong. I spend the morning in a daze, going through the motions of my daily routine. Make coffee, feed the dogs, check the news. There's nothing new about the missing hikers, but there is a small item about strange animal sightings in the area. The article is vague, talking about unidentified large fauna and possible escaped exotic pets. I know what I heard last night was no escaped pet. As the day wears on, my fear begins to crystallize into determination. I can't just sit here waiting for whatever it is to come for me. I need answers. I dig out my old hiking gear and start packing a backpack. Flashlight, extra batteries, first aid kit, water, food. I strap on my hunting knife and after a moment's hesitation, my rifle. I've never been much of a hunter, but its weight is reassuring. Just as I'm about to head out, my phone rings. It's Sarah from the diner. "Don't go into the woods," she says without preamble, her voice tight with fear. "What? How did you—" "Just listen," she cuts me off. "Something's happening on the mountain. People are going missing. Not just the hikers. 2 more last night, a couple driving up to their cabin. Car found empty on the road." I swallow hard. "What do you think is going on?" There's a long pause. When Sarah speaks again, her voice is barely above a whisper. "The elders say the mountain is waking up, that the old spirits are hungry. They're warning everyone to stay inside after dark, to not answer if you hear calling." A chill runs down my spine as I think of the cry I heard last night. "Thanks for the warning," I manage to say. After I hang up, I stand there for a long moment, backpack in hand. Every rational part of my brain is screaming at me to get in my truck and drive down the mountain, to not stop until I'm far, far away from here. But this is my home, has been for 20 years, and something is threatening it, threatening my neighbors, my community. I can't just run away. Decision made, I shoulder my pack and head out. Shadow and Luna whine as I leave, clearly unhappy about being left behind. I'll be back soon, I promise them, hoping it's true. The forest is quiet as I start down one of the old hiking trails, too quiet. No birdsong, no rustle of small animals in the underbrush. It's as if the whole mountain is holding its breath. I've been walking for about an hour when I find the first sign that something is very, very wrong. There, in a small clearing, is a tent. It's been ripped to shreds, the fabric hanging in tatters. Around it, the ground is torn up, great furrows dug into the earth as if by massive claws. My heart pounding, I approach the ruined campsite. There's no blood, no signs of bodies. But the destruction is chilling. What could have done this? As I'm examining the tracks around the tent, trying to make sense of the strange, elongated prints, I hear it. A low, rumbling growl, the same sound I heard last night. It's close, too close. I spin around, rifle raised, but there's nothing there, just trees and shadows. But the growl comes again, and this time I can pinpoint its direction. It's coming from behind a large boulder about 50 yards away. Every instinct screams at me to run, but I know that whatever this thing is, it's faster than me, stronger. My only chance is to face it. "Come on out," I shout, surprised at the steadiness in my voice. "I know you're there." For a long moment, nothing happens. Then, slowly, something begins to emerge from behind the boulder. At first, all I can see is a dark shape, indistinct in the forest shadows. But as it moves into a patch of sunlight, I get my first clear look at the thing that's been terrorizing the mountain. It's impossible. That's the only word my mind can conjure as I stare at the creature. It's huge, easily 8 feet tall, with a body that seems to be a nightmarish blend of bear and man. Its fur is black as midnight, matted and tangled. Its face is a twisted parody of a human visage, with eyes that glow with an unnatural intelligence. I raise my rifle, but my hands are shaking so badly I can barely aim. The creature takes a step forward and I stumble back, my foot catching on a root. I go down hard, the rifle flying from my grasp. The monster is on me in an instant, its hot breath washing over my face. This is it, I think. This is how I die. But the killing blow doesn't come. Instead, the creature leans in close, its glowing eyes boring into mine. And then, to my utter shock, it speaks. "You do not belong here," it growls, its voice like gravel and thunder. "This mountain is ours. It has always been ours. You humans have forgotten the old ways, forgotten how to listen to the land. But now we will remind you." With that, it rears back and lets out a roar that shakes the very ground. Then, faster than should be possible for something its size, it turns and vanishes into the forest. I lie there for a long time, my heart pounding, my mind reeling. What I've seen, what I've heard, it changes everything. The stories the elders told, the warnings about the mountain spirits, they weren't metaphors or myths. They were real. As I finally manage to pick myself up and begin the long, shaky walk back to my cabin, I know that nothing will ever be the same. The mountain has awakened, and with it, forces beyond our understanding. I don't know what comes next. I don't know if I should run or stay and try to warn others. All I know is that the line between our world and something older, something wilder, has blurred, and we are no longer at the top of the food chain. The sun is setting as I reach my cabin. Shadow and Luna greet me with frantic barks and wagging tails, clearly relieved to see me. As I step inside and lock the door behind me, I can hear the wind picking up outside. But now I know it's not just the wind. It's a voice, ancient and powerful, whispering secrets and warnings on the night air. I collapse onto my couch, exhaustion and adrenaline warring in my body. My encounter in the woods plays on repeat in my mind. The creature's words echo in my ears. This mountain is ours. It has always been ours. What does this mean for me? For the town? For everyone who calls this mountain home? I wake with a start, disoriented. Sunlight streams through the windows, and for a moment, I almost convince myself that yesterday was just a vivid nightmare. But the aches in my body and the mud caked on my boots tell a different story. I spend the morning in a daze, alternating between pacing the cabin and staring out the windows at the seemingly peaceful forest. Should I tell someone what I saw? Who would believe me? Around midday, I steel myself and make the call to the local ranger station. I report finding the destroyed campsite, careful to omit any mention of the creature. The ranger on the other end of the line sounds tired, stressed. They thank me for the information and assure me they'll send someone to investigate. As I hang up, I wonder if I've done the right thing. Will I be leading more people into danger? The day drags on, each hour feeling like an eternity. I try to distract myself with work, but I can't focus. Every sound from outside makes me jump. As evening approaches, I find myself drawn to the porch. The forest is bathed in the golden light of sunset, beautiful and serene. It's hard to reconcile this peaceful scene with the terror of yesterday. That's when I see it. At the edge of the clearing, half hidden in the lengthening shadows, stands a figure. For a heart-stopping moment, I think it's the creature from yesterday. But as my eyes adjust, I realize it's a person. An old woman, her silver hair gleaming in the fading light. I blink, and suddenly she's at the foot of my porch steps. I didn't see her move. She looks up at me, her dark eyes ancient and knowing. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she says. It's not really a question. I nod, unable to speak. She climbs the steps with a grace that belies her apparent age. "I am Esther," she says. "I speak for the elders." "The elders?" I manage to ask. "Those who remember the old ways? Those who know the truth of this mountain?" She fixes me with a penetrating stare. "The spirits are restless. The balance has been disrupted." "By what?" I ask, dreading the answer. "By us. By humanity's endless expansion, our disregard for the natural world." She sighs, a sound full of ancient sorrow. "The creature you saw is a guardian, a protector of this land. It has slumbered for centuries, but now it wakes." "What can we do?" I ask, my voice barely a whisper. Esther's eyes seem to look through me into some distant past or possible future. "We must remember. We must listen. We must find a way to restore the balance." She reaches into a pouch at her waist and pulls out a small object, an amulet carved from dark wood hung on a leather cord. She presses it into my hand. It's warm to the touch, thrumming with an energy I can't explain. "Wear this," she says. "It will offer some protection, and it will help you hear the mountain's voice." Before I can ask any more questions, she turns and starts down the steps. At the bottom, she pauses and looks back. "The days ahead will be difficult, but you have a role to play in what's to come. Be brave, be wise, and above all, listen." With that, she walks into the gathering darkness. Within moments, she's gone, swallowed up by the forest as if she was never there. I stand on the porch for a long time, the amulet clutched in my hand, my mind reeling. The weight of responsibility settles on my shoulders. Whatever is happening on this mountain, I'm a part of it now. As night falls, I retreat inside, locking the door behind me. I slip the amulet over my head, feeling its warmth against my skin. Outside, the wind picks up, whispering through the trees. But now I listen more closely. There's a rhythm to it, a pattern, almost like words. The mountain is trying to speak, and for the first time I'm ready to listen. I wake before dawn, the amulet warm against my chest. The cabin is filled with a strange, expectant silence. Even Shadow and Luna are quiet, watching me with knowing eyes. As I step outside, the pre-dawn air is crisp and charged with energy. The forest seems different somehow, more alive. I can almost feel the trees breathing, the earth pulsing beneath my feet. I close my eyes and listen, really listen, like Esther told me to. At first, there's nothing but the usual forest sounds, but then, slowly, I begin to hear something else. It's not quite a voice, not quite music, but something in between. A song as old as the mountains themselves. I don't understand the words, if they even are words, but I feel their meaning. The mountain is in pain, it's angry. But underneath that, there's a longing, a desire for balance, for harmony. I open my eyes, tears streaming down my face. I know what I have to do. I spend the day preparing. I pack a backpack with supplies, water, food, first aid kit. I strap on my hunting knife, more for comfort than any real expectation of using it. The rifle I leave behind. This isn't a battle that can be won with weapons. As the sun begins to set, I say goodbye to Shadow and Luna. They whine, sensing something important is happening, but stay behind as I've trained them to. I strike out into the forest, the amulet guiding my steps. I don't know where I'm going, but I trust that I'll end up where I need to be. The forest at night is a different world. Shadows dance in the corners of my vision. Strange calls echo through the trees. But I'm not afraid. The amulet pulses warmly, a constant reminder that I'm not alone. I walk for what feels like hours, climbing higher and higher up the mountain. The air grows thin, the terrain more rugged. Just as I'm beginning to wonder if I've made a terrible mistake, I break through the tree line into a small clearing. There, in the center of the clearing, stands the creature. The guardian. It's even more imposing than I remembered, its massive form silhouetted against the star-filled sky. It turns to face me, its eyes glowing in the darkness. I feel the weight of its gaze, centuries of wisdom and wildness boring into me. I take a deep breath and step forward. I'm here to listen, I say, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. I'm here to understand. The guardian regards me for a long moment. Then, slowly, it nods. What follows is indescribable. The guardian doesn't speak, not in words. Instead, it shows me. Visions flood my mind. I see the mountain as it was thousands of years ago, pristine and wild. I see the first humans to settle here, living in harmony with the land. I see the gradual encroachment of the modern world, the damage we've done without even realizing it. I feel the mountain's pain as if it were my own, the loss of ancient trees, the pollution of streams, the disruption of delicate ecosystems. But I also feel its resilience, its deep, abiding love for all the creatures that call it home, including us. As the visions fade, I find myself on my knees, gasping for breath. The guardian looms over me, but I'm no longer afraid. I understand now. What can we do? I ask, my voice hoarse. How can we make this right? The guardian's response comes not in words, but in feelings, in impressions, balance, respect, stewardship. We don't need to leave the mountain entirely, but we need to change how we live here. We need to remember that we're part of this ecosystem, not separate from it. I nod, understanding flowing through me. I'll help, I promise. I'll teach others. We'll do better. The guardian makes a sound then, not the terrifying roar from before, but something softer, almost approving. It reaches out one massive paw and gently, so gently, touches the amulet around my neck. Warmth floods through me, and with it, knowledge. I know now how to hear the mountain, how to interpret its needs, how to help others do the same. As the first light of dawn breaks over the mountain, the guardian steps back. It gives me one last look, a look that says more clearly than words ever could, "We're trusting you. Don't let us down." Then in a blink, it's gone, melting into the forest as if it was never there. I make my way back down the mountain as the sun rises, my mind reeling but my purpose clear. There's so much work to be done, so many people to talk to convince, to teach. It won't be easy. Change never is. But as I approach my cabin, seeing it with new eyes, understanding for the first time how it fits into the larger tapestry of the mountain, I feel hope. The amulet is warm against my skin, a constant reminder of the responsibility I've been given and the trust that's been placed in me. The mountain has awakened, and now, finally, so have we. As I step onto my porch, Shadow and Luna bounding out to greet me, I take a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. For the first time in days, I smile. The future is uncertain, the path ahead challenging, but I'm ready. We're all part of this mountain story now,